Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hi to all, especially to our lecturer Madam Nursyahira binti Abdullah and all my beloved friends. My name is Elyn Fazlyn binti Omar. Me and my group are from Group 1. We will be presenting about the Spratly Island dispute on South China Sea. Our group consists of 6 members, namely Siti Fathihah binti Rahman, Nursyahira binti Mazlan, Nur Shainadirah Edz'rynn binti Nur Herman, Nurzahirah binti Anas, and Nurain Najihah binti Ayob. So, without further ado, let's get started to our presentation.
So now we are going to start with the history of Spratly Islands. So what is Spratly Islands? Well, the Spratly Islands are a group of more than 100 rocks, islets cased in the South China Sea of the Pacific Ocean. Well, they are approximately halfway between Vietnam and Philippines and are situated north of insular Malaysia. They are also claimed by a number regional of nations. While the Spratly Island cover a sizable regions of oceans, about 158,000 square miles. Although the islands are mainly uninhabited, they offer excellent fishing grounds and could have sizable oil and gas reserves. However, all of the roughly 45 islands, cays, reef and shore that are occupied by a military troop from Malaysia, Taiwan, China, the Philippines or Vietnam contain a structure that are under their control. Some of the islands do have civilian settlement. Additionally, Brunei has asserted ownership of an exclusive economic zone that encompasses the uninhabited Louisa Reef in the southerly Spratly Islands. While there are records indicate that Chinese and Vietnamese fishermen have lived on the island at a different point of time. Prior to 1970, the island's strategic location was their primary importance. They were governed by France from 1933 to 1939. Well, then it was occupied by Japan during World War II, who turned it into a submarine station, while Taiwan, mainland China, Vietnam and Philippines later added claim that based on proximity to the island after Japan relinquished its ownership of them in 1951. While the Spratly Island dispute is an ongoing territorial conflict involving the China, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam and Brunei over the ownership of the South China Sea.
Oil and natural gas resources are reported to be plentiful in the area, but estimates vary widely. In comparison to Kuwait, which contains 13 billion barrels of oil, the South China Sea is thought to hold 17.7 billion barrels of crude oil, according to the Chinese Ministry of Natural Resources and Mines. The South China Sea is thought to hold 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas overall, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration (EIA). The Spratly Islands, in particular, according to the EIA, contain essentially no proven or probable oil deposits. The development and use of these resources in the South China Sea, which is abundant in oil and gas, have been hampered by competing claims. So, apart from this, China and the Philippines signed a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) on cooperation on oil and gas development in November 2018, which is based on the shared usage of assets rather than asset ownership. This kind of arrangement may enable the claimant state to cooperatively utilize the natural gas in the offshore area, because in the past, hostile Chinese naval patrols discouraged Manila from investigating gas resources in dispute areas such as the Red Bank. In 1970, the Philippines started looking for oil in the regions west of Palawan. The region was first explored in Red Bank or Table Mount. In 1976, after a well had been drilled, gas was found. The PRC's concerns, however, forced a halt to the exploration. The first Filipino oil company found an oil field off the coast of Palawan, an island province that borders the South China Sea and the Sulu Sea, on March 27, 1984. Early in 1978, an agreement was made between Vietnam and Japan on the exploration of oil in the South China Sea. Vietnam's proven oil reserve grew in 2011, making them the third largest in the Asia-Pacific region as a result of offshore exploration activity. yet the nation imports a net amount of oil-related goods. The Ocean Oil 981 is China's first independently built and designed oil drilling platform in the South China Sea. The installation was moved close to the Paracel Island on May 2, 2004, which Vietnam said violated its territorial rights. The region is in the waters around the Paracel Island, which China occupies and militarily controls, according to Chinese officials who claim that it is legitimate.
Next issue is maritime security involvement to claim on the island. China threatens the sovereignty claims because the capability for China to strengthen its regional power over other countries. They will be able to effectively manage the South China Sea by their ability. They then made territorial claims in an attempt to dominate it. PRC claims to the 9-dash line that historically claimed at its own over the island. The freedom of navigation was also issued by China when they saw the Philippines ships near the Spratly Island. China claims their right as they have the territory for the island. Philippines applying international law in against the PRC in UNCLOS to contest its claims in the South China Sea. But when its claim for that was failed, Philippines returned to the historic claim. The sovereignty claims was not legal for each country involved since there is no basic claim for that territory.
Territorial disputes are one of the underlying issues driving the conflict over the Spratly Islands. The first issue is based on historical claims. Since the Han Dynasty, China argues that it has exercised jurisdiction over the South China Sea for thousands of years, and it has historical evidence to support its claims. The second issue is economic interests. Many of them depend on the South China Sea for their livelihoods. For example, the fishing industry is the main source of income for many people in the Philippines and Vietnam. There is also the issues on legal disputes. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled in favor of the Philippines in a case challenging China's claims in the South China Sea. However, China has rejected the decision and continues to assert its sovereignty over the dispute areas.
Next, I will continue to the next issue, which is historical grounds. Every country has their own reason why they want and claim that part of Spratly Island belongs to them. Among them are claims based on historical facts like China, Vietnam, and Taiwan. China still made claims on Spratly Island, even though the geographical distance between China and Spratly Island was too far and claimed it based on historical grounds. This is because they had mentioned that the dynasty had been traced at Spratly Island before this. The Spratly Island, according to the China, have developed into a Chinese commerce route during the past 2,000 years ago. Furthermore, Vietnam also asserts its historical credential. According to Vietnam, there is proof that it first began to occupy the Spratly and Paracel Island in the 17th century. Moreover, Taiwan is likewise not far behind in asserting its claim to the Spratly Island. Taiwan's claim is supported by the Spratly Islands occupation in 1648. Prior to that, Taiwan released a map of its borders in 1947 that showed the Spratly Island to be part of its territory.
The United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea is known as UNCLOS. The Law of the Sea Convention or the Law of the Sea Treaty are other names for it. It is a global agreement or treaty that sets rules and regulations for using the oceans and seas around the world in order to use and preserve marine resources and to guarantee the preservation and protection of all marine life. Several nations, including China, Taiwan, and the Philippines, are at odds over the Spratly. All of the Spratly Islands are still considered to be part of China by the People's Republic of China, PRC. The PRC joined the UNCLOS on July 29, 1994, becoming signatory. The entirety of the Spratly Islands are also claimed by the Republic of China, ROC, which ruled mainly China prior to 1949, but has only been confined to Taiwan since that time. To understand the dispute, it is essential to take into account the legal foundation of each claim under UNCLOS. Each country provides varying evidence to support its claims. According to 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, all of the islands that the Philippines claims to own in the Spratly are located within its 200-mile exclusive economic zone. The People's Republic of China cannot explain its baseline claims to the Spratly Island, according to the Republic of the Philippines, because the PRC is not an archipelagic state, according to the maritime law. Same goes to the territorial claims by Brunei that the reef are based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS, and states that its continental south, which comprises its area and resources, includes the southernmost group of the Spratly Islands. A small number of islands in the Spratly Islands are subject to Malaysia's claims, which are limited to the islands that fall within its 200-mile exclusive economic zone as established by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Malaysia has seized 5 islands with military force because it believes they are part of its continental shelf. On 25 July 1994, Vietnam ratified the UNCLOS. It declared that the National Assembly affirms Vietnam's sovereignty and its position that territorial claims and other disputes in the Eastern Sea should be settled through peaceful negotiation in accordance with international law, as well as the sovereign rights and jurisdiction of the relevant states. And now I'm going to explain the definition of neorealism. Related theory that was discovered under the Spratly Island dispute is neorealism. During the past years, most of the theory of international relations has been dominated by neorealism. Neorealism, also known as structural realism, is an approach to understanding international relations that places a strong emphasis on the importance of power politics, views on competition and conflict as lasting characteristics, and finds the room for collaboration. States participate in power politics because they cannot be confident of the intention of other nations or their security due to the anarchic nature of the international system. Anarchy, according to the structural realism, is the primary factor driving the motive and acts of states. Anarchy in the framework of the international system indicates the absence of higher authorities, and because sovereign states are often seen as the principal players in international relations, an anarchical world would be one in which there is no greater authority than the state.
One of the most nebulous and unclear words in the English language is anarchy. Neuralists will emphasize the fact that there is no overarching authority to set moral standards in the international system, which is characterized by anarchy. States are forced to rely on their own strength and ability to protect their security and further their interests in the absence of a global government or other international agency. One of the ways in which anarchy affects state behavior is through the security dilemma. Security dilemmas arise when states take actions to increase their security, such as building up their military or asserting territorial claims, which other states may interpret as threatening. This can lead to a cycle of mistrust and tension as other states respond by taking actions to protect their own security. This could eventually lead to conflict if these actions escalate and are not resolved through diplomacy. In the context of territorial disputes in the South China Sea, anarchy means that each state involved must act in its own self-interest to pursue its territorial claims and protect its interests. In the case of the South China Sea, the principle of anarchy has been driving force behind the territorial disputes between China and its neighbors. China has pursued a policy of expanding its territorial claims in the region, building military installations on dispute islands and engaging in other assertive behavior. Other countries in the region such as Vietnam, the Philippines and Japan has responded by increasing their own military capabilities and seeking alliances with other countries such as the United States. An example of the security dilemma in action is the deployment of military assets in the South China Sea. For neuralists, the only way to reduce the effects of anarchy is for the state to engage in balance of power politics. This involves states aligning themselves with others to balance the power of other states. Overall, the principles of anarchy in neorealism highlight the importance of power and security in international relations and the challenges of managing competition between states in the absence of a central authority.
Nuralists contend that rather than focusing on absolute gain, states are more concerned about maintaining or enhancing their relative gains in the international system, which is include their power and influence compared to other states. While this is pertinent to the dispute over the Spratly Island, because the claimants are more focused on seizing control of the island and the resources than stand in for than they are on significantly and expanding their relative strength or influence. The framework also emphasized that each state's intentions and capabilities when it comes to either conflict or cooperation with other states, or in addition to state absolute or relative gains.
Next, I will move to the next principle, which is balance of power. According to Morgenthau, balance of power refers to a relatively stable distribution of power between state actors on the international stage, an equilibrium of power in international relations that prevents one nation from imposing its will on or interfering with the interests of another nation. The balance of power is a theory and approach to international relations that rule that the might of other nations serve as the best check on the majority of a state. This can be related to the Spratly Island dispute because other nations are worried about preserving a balance of power in the region as a result of China's emergence as a significant power. This is because China has used their power to seize all the territories on Spratly Island because they want to monopolize all the sources that have been there.
Next is the self-help principle. In the anarchic structure, there are two main consequences. Firstly, in every country, the international system is a self-help system, and it means that the country in charge of taking care of itself and to protect their interests based on the dispute, it clearly shows that China really want to conquer and control that territory for their sake. They include military and diplomatic support, economic activity, and the major shipping routes. Each state must be able to fend for itself because they all experience perpetual insecurity. It leads to another concept that can be related to the self-help principle, which is capability. States' ability to survive depends on their capabilities. Military and technical capabilities all play a role in neorealism. Based on the disputes, China was not able to take control over the island because of its incapability to do so.
China Sea, one of the world's largest continental shelf and a rich source of resources like oil, natural gas, minerals and seafood, is where the Spratly Islands are located, lead to the six claimants' territorial demands, which in turn lead to the conflict. Many sovereign entities including Brunei, the People's Republic of China or PRC, Taiwan, Republic of China ROC, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines and Vietnam have competing island and marine claims in the South China Sea. This can be related to one of the principles of neorealism theory, which is the principle of relative gains, because the claimants are less interested in considerably increasing their relative strengths or influence than they are in gaining control of the islands and the resources they represent. The right of the fisheries, the exploration and future extraction of natural gas and oil on the seabed in different portions of the South China Sea, and the strategic control of vital shipping lanes and are all the things that the claimants are interested in. The need for oil and gas, fisheries and other natural resources is critical for feeding the population of each claimant country and boosting economic growth, according to the theories of human fundamental needs. Spratly Island's economic advantages and strategic location are thought to be the primary drivers for all claimant nations' claims. If one party were to win sole control of the area, that state would have complete control over the region's economic routes and trading routes, as well as provide the occupant military advantages in waging war on all other countries in the area. As the second largest economy in the world behind the US, China needs to extract considerable economic benefits from the Spratly in order to feed its expanding population and maintain its economic growth. Fishing, oil exploration, and other resource extraction will help China achieve its objective if it could dominate the Spratlys.
I will continue with maritime security issues. PRC attitudes are more likely to be related to the anarchic character that they have. At some points, PRC called Filipino warships as soon as a Filipino Navy ship was spotted by them, with the aim of protecting the safety of the Chinese fishermen, and accused that some Philippine senior officials misled public opinion. The Philippines is shown as an aggressive warship sending state that defies the consensus of the peace, whereas the PRC presents itself as a peaceful state. The PRC is acting morally upright, whereas the Philippines is acting in an acceptable manner. PRC only views itself as defending its territorial sovereignty and marine rights and interests. The principal balance of powers can be explained in this issue when China tried to enlarge their maritime border. At that time, China took this advantage to claim the territory on that island. The domination from China for their interests has made the power unbalanced for the other countries.
Now we're moving on to analyzing the issues. For China's creation of artificial island in Spratly violated the international law according to the International Arbitral Tribunal and has caused several harm to the marine environment. While the tribunal determined that China's recent large-scale island building and land reclamation at 7 feature in the Spratly Island have serious harmed the coral reef ecosystem. In the article of 192 and 194 of the UN clause require China to maintain and protect the marine environment, including its delicate ecosystem and the habitat of extinct, threatened or endangered species. While China has disregarded this obligation, China and the Philippines have both signed and approved the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is widely regarded as constitutions of the sea. While the panel has also determined that China's 9-line claims, which cover almost entire South China Sea, is invalid because it's lacked a legal foundation under UN's clause. The tribunal noted that China has created sizable artificial island on Mischief Reef, a low-tide elevations in the Philippines exclusive economic zone, which has permanently destroyed evidence of the future original state and caused irreparable damage to the coral reef.
Next is the issues analysis on international laws and regulations. In particular, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea provides a legal basis for resolving maritime disputes, but they lack a clear mechanism for resolving territorial claims. The main challenge is competing territorial claims and the lack of a clear legal framework to resolve them. To address these issues, efforts should be made to strengthen and enforce international laws and regulations.
The issue is about historical grounds. The balance of power idea may be used to assess the current situation in the South China Sea. According to the realism paradigm standpoint, the state actor's primary concern is the battle for power. Competition and even war may result from governments vying for dominance within their interactions. Only the distribution of power can bring about order and stability in international relations with his power politics. The goal of the balance of power is to keep nations independent, prevent hegemony, and maybe retain the current state of affairs. This can be related to the issue. It is obvious that China, a newly emerging global power, feels secure enough to carry out its operation in the South China Sea. With such authority, China unilaterally asserts its claim to the maritime territory in order to further its interests under the global BRI programs. The first recommendation can be placed is through ICJ, International Court of Justice. The dispute between 6 countries, which are Vietnam, Philippines, China, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei, become a problem and generally assume that it will be difficult to settle it. But actually, there are still ways to settle down the dispute that has been happening towards countries that want to claim their rights in Spratly Island. This can be proven by the case that has been settled by the International Court of Justice which is ICJ, which is a dispute between Indonesia and Malaysia. In 2002, Indonesia and Malaysia used the ICJ to resolve their dispute over the island of Sipadan and Bukitan. In addition, the conflict between Singapore and Malaysia, which was resolved through ICJ, is a disagreement that is more pertinent. Applying them to all the contests incident in the South China Sea would be relatively doable.
Another recommendation is strengthening international law. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea requires concerted efforts by the international community. One of the ways to strengthen the law is to develop a dispute resolution mechanism. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea provides several mechanisms for resolving disputes, including negotiation, mediation, conciliation, and arbitration. Develop a dispute resolution mechanism is to establish a specialized body or tribunal that can provide expert guidance and make decisions. For example, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea was established under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea to resolve disputes related to the interpretation and application of the law.
Well, another proposal to end the Spratly dispute involved creating a multilateral marine peace park, MMPP, which temporarily suspend territorial claims to the disputed islands. While peace parks are designed as stress boundary protected areas, they are formally dedicated to the protection and maintenance of biological diversity of natural and associated cultural resources, and to the promotion of peace and cooperation according to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. While the Spratly dispute was largely a multilateral peace park between 12 states, and this MPP may serve as an example of a peaceful park network. One of it is the International Peace Park that called Waterton Glacier was established between Canada and the United States in 1932. This agreement resulted in greater partnership, ecotourism, and cooperative research. And in the 1959 Antarctic Treaty, which established collaboration scientific study and conservation procedure, is a prime example of a multi-national peace park.
Now I'm going to explain the recommendation for jointly natural resources. It might be difficult for parties to resolve conflicts by discussion in regions with several claims, such as the South China Sea, particularly if sovereignty disputes are also concerned. As a result, it is widely agreed that the most viable intermediate option for resolving the South China Sea conflict is for the claimants to lay aside the sovereignty disputes and cooperatively utilize the natural riches. Such arrangement can take the form of practical interim arrangements as required by Articles 74 and 93 and Act 3 of the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS. A Spratly Resource Development Authority will be established under the Joint Resources Development Method. This organization will enable cooperative ventures between claimants essential for the extraction of natural resources in the South China Sea. This body will guarantee that claimant nations do not take sovereignty claims for granted. Furthermore, in order to establish this body and fulfill its objective, countries must be ready to collaborate and have a fundamental character in their interaction with one another.
The Spratly Island dispute is the conflict that still has not settled and come to the conclusion. The ongoing disputes still remain the same, so there are two fundamentally distinct epistemological foci at the center of the argument. In contrast to the other states, which thinks that this can only be determined by applying the law, one state believes that history has the authority to define who has sovereignty over what. Also, one state believes that is the victim while the other is the aggressor. This serves to recreate the disagreement in irreconcilable terms and push it into the deadlock of competing identities and perceptions. At this point, each country, especially China and the 6 involved countries, should be more considerate and when involving each other region to avoid any misunderstanding from happening in the future. That's all for my presentation group. Thank you for listening.